Welcome back.
Hi.
And welcome. I was waiting for you to start, and then it was on me. And I'm dizzy today, so we were talking about this earlier.
That's right.
So forgive me for not knowing which way is up.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm dizzy Shannon Penrod.
I know, we hope that you're going to be better.
Well, I'm dizzy all the time. Somebody was saying something about dizzy the other day, and I was like, yeah, but I'm dizzy all the time. Like,
really?
Pretty much all the time. Mm-hmm. And because they were talking about going on some ride at something, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I can't do that. I'm dizzy all the time.
Right.
But then I have, in the spring and in the fall, sometimes I have like intense dizzy that comes.
Okay.
And today I'm intense dizzy.
All right.
It's not fun.
No, that's not fun. Is it vertigo?
Well, it's funny because I've been through, since I was a teenager, I've been through so many tests. Somebody, when I was a teenager, said that I had vertigo, but then, and I think stress and not getting enough rest exacerbates it.
Of course it does.
And probably too much salt intake. See me telling on myself
Right.
now, all these things that probably add into it. But after Jem was diagnosed, I started having bouts of them again. And it could be partially hormonal, because after having a child, that had changed too. But
Right.
so then another doctor said I had Meniere's. Somebody else has said it's benign positional vertigo, where the crystals, I don't know.
It's a drag to put up with.
It's a big old drag. And I was never somebody who you could put on a carousel ever in my life. That wasn't,
okay.
I go to Disneyland and I ride the bench most of the time and bring my book, and I sit there and do whatever while my family is on rides. There are a couple of rides. I can go on the Peter Pan ride, but that's about it for me, right? That's about, I can't do the carousel.
You're not doing roller coasters.
Oh, somebody said to me, but you can, the other day they said, oh, but you can do, like, what's the one mountain? And I was like, are you out of your mind?
Right.
I got to take stuff to ride the tram.
I get dizzy on rides too. And we were recently at a festival in Hidden Hills, California, where they have a carnival. And Wyatt loves to do that one that tilts around. He craves it. Well,
they say that there's a spectrum of your inner ear and how well you like to be in different positions and so on and so forth. And for some of us, our inner ear is so overactive that, if you were to spin me a little bit in this chair, I would be like, ooh, but our kids on the spectrum, they say a lot of times their inner ear is underreactive. So I don't know if you remember, there was a big phase right around when our kids were being diagnosed in the astronaut training.
Right.
Did they ever do that with Wyatt?
No.
They take a turntable. A lot of OTs were doing this, and I think they still are doing it. So they take a turntable and they set the kid on it, and there were like these 10 positions. So first they had to sit, and they would turn them 10 spins to the right and then 10 spins to the left. Then they would have them lay on their left side, 10 spins to the right, 10 spins. It's making me dizzy thinking about it. And then they had to lay on their back, and then I think they had to lay on their belly. And it was amazing, because after they would do this with some kids, they would speak.
Oh, really?
They would speak. Kids that weren't speaking would speak. I saw it with my very own eyes. And a kid who was saying one word would sometimes say a full sentence. And it was a very interesting thing. And one of the things that Card had said to us, Jem was very reactive and would talk better after he would be spun. So we had a turntable for a while, but I also would stick him in an office chair and I would spin him.
Really?
And he loved it, man. He just thought it was the greatest thing. But one of the things that Card said to us as a reinforcer was take him to Disneyland. And because we noticed that every time we would take him to Disneyland, he, for like 2 days after, would be more interactive and he would talk more. And we would always take him on the teacups.
Right.
And he loved the teacups. I can't even
the
watch the
teacups.
teacups.
Right.
I'm like holding on to things. So there is something about it that, it wakes up a part of their brain that is not as, that's got a little bit of a snooze button maybe on it, where other people it's a little hyperactive. So, there we go.
Well, in the news today we have a story about the brain.
Yeah.
In autism brains, neurons may take up more space than usual.
Don't you find that interesting?
Yes. People with autism have more gray matter, and which is what neuronal matter is, in their brains overall than their typical peers do. The unpublished findings are based on a brain scans from 211 people with autism, a large sample size for of this kind.
And this was presented just the other day at the 2018 Society of Neuroscience annual meeting in San Diego. And, you know, years ago, I can remember they were starting to do MRIs on kids with brains that had autism. And they were saying that little kids, that their brains, we talked about this last week, their brains grew faster. And they were trying to figure out what it is. Of course, we've had people on the show talk about that it's an autoimmune response potentially.
Right.
It partially explains why more boys than girls, because there's a cascade effect that happens with one of the hormones that leads to the brain growing faster. But very, very interesting about it taking up more space, because because it's bigger, right?
Right.
But it's gray matter. And we were talking last week about the fact that I remember somebody describing it to me and saying, so it grows so fast it doesn't have time to make all the connections. So it's like having long distance telephone service without having local service, which I found really a great analogy when Jem was growing up. But so a great thing for us to be able to say that our kids have bigger brains. So there to everybody else, right? And then did you get a chance to vote yesterday?
Of course I did.
Well, not of course. I have to say that there were several people that I talked to on Monday and Sunday, and then a little bit yesterday, that I was saying to everybody, you're going to vote,
I
right?
sent my ballot in by mail.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
See, and I like to go, but
Okay.
I think after this last time, I was like, you know, I need to rethink this a little bit, because I saw things happen to people and they weren't able to vote, and it was
Really?
driving
What did
me
you see
crazy.
happen?
Well, for instance, this was interesting. My sister ended up being in the hospital,
Right.
and I was like, "Are you going to get to vote?" And she said, "I don't know." And I thought, well, there's a good reason to put your ballot in
Right.
early. But she did get to vote. She told her nurse, and she said, "I want to vote." And her precinct brought a ballot to her, and she voted from the hospital
Really?
bed. Yeah, which I didn't know you could do that. But I would bet that there are people in the hospital who don't know that you can ask for that.
Right. I'm sure.
But apparently you can. But there were people who had to travel, and they were like, "Yeah, I didn't know I was traveling, and now I." So I can definitely see the benefit. Once I voted by mail
It's so
when I was in
easy.
college. I always just feel like, well, where does that go? And do they really open it? And does it get counted? And I like to go, and I always take Jem with me. From the time he was little and in his little carrying case, I brought him every single time I have voted. And yesterday was no exception, but we had to be there at 7 o'clock when they opened, because our lives were busy yesterday. And he was not happy with me, can I tell you, that I dragged him out of bed
At 7.
to go stand there and watch me vote. But I said to him,
He understands all about voting, though.
he does. He did not, for instance, we had so many propositions, and he knew some of them, but he didn't know
he did
all
know
of them.
them.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you watch any TV at all, they
Right.
bombarded you with
Right.
them this year. But we have talked about voting literally since he was in the carrier, and he knows that I have just been adamant from the time he was little that it is his responsibility. So of course it's implied to him that it's his right. But this has come up a lot in this last week about people on the autism spectrum, and do they have the right to vote? And I see that more and more people are taking the initiative, and there are different laws in different places that talk about what intellectual level you need to be able to vote. But it's getting wider in more and more places. But there's a great story this morning, it was out yesterday, about a mom who wanted her son to vote. And he is 28 years old, on the autism spectrum. And so she wrote him essentially a social story about, it's an instruction manual about
On how to vote.
and that voting is important, and that he's expected to do it. They noted in the story, and this was covered by CNN, which I appreciate, they noted that if he lived someplace else, that he may not have been able to vote, but where
Right.
he lives, he was able to vote, and that he and his he read the story every day, that his parents read it to him, that some of the people that work with him read him the story every day. I think she's got to publish it.
I think she is publishing it.
Because it's
I think
you
I
know,
read that.
she needs to be able to give that to the community. But I love it because it goes hand in hand with what we've been doing. I
Right.
mean, there are still things, because we were at a different precinct yesterday because we moved than we've ever been before. And I was
Right.
like, I don't really know how this works here. And we stood in the line, and then they came and said to us, well, do you have a green ballot or a yellow ballot? And I was like, I don't know. How would I know that? Well, it's written on your booklet. Oh, well, I have a green ballot, you know? And, well, then you need to stand in this line. Well, I've never done that before. I've never
Right.
had a green and a yellow.
Right.
Sometimes in this world, we just, like, people take... it's as if they take it for granted that everybody knows how to do everything, right?
Right.
I always get angry when I go into a restaurant and it's a fast food place and it has no clearly defined signs about stand here and order
Right,
here
right.
and pick up your food here. And so you get in the wrong lane and everybody looks at you like you're completely from another planet. How would you know?
Right.
Makes me mad. But in any case, so Jem got to see his mother and his father stumble through not knowing the difference between a green ballot and a yellow ballot.
Right.
Honestly. and then of course, because we had just moved and we made the decision that my husband was going to write in to get his voter registration and I was going to do it online and we were going to see how it worked. Well, his went in, mine did not, but I was able to keep pursuing it on the phone and online. I had to register 4 times.
Did you really?
4 times because it wasn't taking it online. But I persevered. And I kept calling them back and saying, am I there, am I there, am I there? And so I was. So we weren't in the actual, where they, where it's printed already. I was on the blue paper, which was the one that was done last week, but my husband was not. He had to vote provisionally.
Oh, okay.
So it's provisional, but it was great because Jem got to see what that is. And that nobody lost it. Nobody was like, I get to vote, it's my right.
Yeah.
My husband voted provisionally. It looked a lot like, but it had, paper attached to it. Then he came with me to the booth. And he's watched me a million times stick the thing in. And every time I say, this is not how it is in every state. In New York, you have to pull the little lever that closes the curtain, and then you flick the levers. But in California, you have the little ink thing, and you have to do the dots. And we talk about the fact that it's not the same every place. And he was so funny because he was like, Mom, I know. And I had my little booklet because I do my booklet ahead of time because otherwise I don't know how you do it. It would take you hours, right? But and I was telling him as I was doing it, look, I'm checking the numbers as I do it because sometimes the ballots are wrong. One of our viewers had written in and said the numbers didn't match up with what was in her booklet.
Right.
And I said, you got to check that. And then when you pull it out, you got to see that it actually inked, no hanging chads, right? We talk about that. We did all, but so at one point, and he was like, too cool for school and acting like he didn't care. And at one point he said, oh, would you like me to mark it for you? Because it looked like it was fun. And I said, unfortunately, that part you can't do. You can stand here, but nobody can mark my ballot for me unless I physically can't do it.
Right.
And I think he was a little bummed. I think he was like, I can't wait to do this. And I can't wait till the first time he votes. So anyway, so with Wyatt, do you guys ever talk about voting?
Yeah, we talk about voting and how important it is.
And so is he, because he's about to turn 17 in a couple of days. So you're just like a year away. He might, no, he'll just miss next year's. So it'll be the year after that he gets to vote. But that's kind of exciting. Do you think he'll be excited about it?
I think so.
Yeah. I think it's a powerful thing, and I love the fact, I love moms who, like you writing about, you wrote the Sammy stories with Wyatt.
About so he wouldn't elope.
Yeah, I think when moms do things like this, it just warms my heart. You make it fit for your kid, but you can check it out on CNN if you want to, and they show a picture of the book, but we think that she's going to be publishing, so you can buy it at your local bookstore. So we have a great guest today. Vince Redmond is going to be with us in just a second, and he, as many of you probably already know, is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Vince worked for years, decades, I believe, as a behavior intervention therapist. So he knows the value of therapy and what the steps are that you have to go through as a family and how overwhelming it can be. Both Nancy and I can testify in front of a congressional Senate hearing about how difficult it is. And I love the fact that now Vince's role has changed, and he's a licensed marriage and family therapist and can help families to deal with some of the anxiety and the stress and the what do I do now that comes with having a child on the spectrum. I've shared before that a million years ago, I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And went to a therapist. Somebody said, well, you got to get help, go to a therapist. And I went to the therapist and was describing all the things that were making me anxious. And she said, oh, well, you got to stop that ABA thing. That's clearly the thing that's making you anxious. You have to be here and do that and find the funding, and you should stop that immediately. And I was like, what?
It's a good thing you didn't listen to her, huh?
Well, can you imagine? You know,
from her perspective, that was what was your issue.
Okay, but I have a friend right now whose 2-year-old son has been diagnosed with a very extremely aggressive form of cancer.
Oh, really?
And this 2-year-old is going through chemotherapy, and it's just and
That's gotta be
radiation.
heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh, it is so. And I see the stress that she and her husband are under, and it's financial stress and it's personal stress. But I don't see anybody walking up to her and saying, "Well, you should just stop trying to get him better." Yeah, like nobody's saying, like everybody's just trying to help her to get through it.
Right.
And I wish. We just did a big long talk about, you know, not wanting to put a negative stigma on autism, but, you know, it is a disorder, and there is a thing that you have to go through to be able to help people, and that is stressful. And I wish people would get on board and offer help and support to families the way I see people stepping up for this friend of ours. It's just remarkable how people are stepping up. It gives me faith in the world, how people are stepping up to support her, because everybody gets it. This
and people
is a child.
don't step up in the same way for autism.
Well, I think
ABA therapy.
Well, no, and even the therapist saying to me, "Well, you should stop that." That's seems like that's stressful. I think that's just unawareness. But how lucky are we that we have Vince, and Vince totally gets that and would never ever say that to a family. I think it's the beginning of that good place that we want to get to with autism, where you get the support you need for the thing that you're actually trying to do, not the unhelpful thing.
Right.
My mother was always somebody who, you know, I remember going off to college and everything was fine, but, you know, one day it wasn't, and I called home and I was like, well, this happened, and you should come home right now. Was your mom like that? My mother was like, you should come, pack your bags, I'll go to the bus station and pick you up. You should come home. And I go, Mom, no, I don't want to come home. I just want to complain about something that happened. Well, you should come home right now. Not helpful. Not helpful. Was your mom that way?
No, not really.
But you were so independent so early on.
I was pretty independent early on.
My mom, if she were alive, would probably say, I did that so that you would say, well, I don't want to come home. That was probably the way she got me to stay at college.
Psychology.
Yes. Anyway, I digress. We should take a break and get Vince
come back
on.
and get Vince
All right,
on the
so
phone.
Vince Redmond after these messages. Stick with us.
Welcome back.
And it took us a little while because we were having some difficulties with sound with Skype. But we've got Vince Redmond on audio and on Skype. So we're going to get picture and sound from 2 different feeds. And so first of all, Vince, we want to welcome you back to Autism Live. We were talking about you just a few minutes before we took a break about how amazing you are. Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist who worked in the field of autism as a behaviorist for many, many, many years. So he has experience in both those fields, and it's just a wonderful gift to the autism community that he is able, as an LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, to bring that perspective to be able to help families. Because this, Nancy and I were saying before, there's nothing easy about this, Vince.
No.
So welcome, Vince.
Welcome, Vince.
Hi. Hello. How are you ladies today?
We're good.
We're doing good.
And better because you're here. So, and I think we teased it to the audience because you guys could hear us. What we want to talk about, Vince, is how parents and therapists talk to each other, because it's not always productive.
Right.
And that the example that I was saying to you during the break is that, you know, sometimes the therapist, well-meaning therapists, will give us as parents, and I'm laughing, because sometimes it is laughable. They'll give us some sort of task to do, like they want us to take data on something, or they want us to follow through with something at a very difficult time of the day or in a very difficult location, or when we've got other kids. And so they'll give us this task, and honestly, it brings up such emotions, does it not, Nancy?
Yes, because it's one thing to be, well, first of all, the way your child reacts differently when the therapist is there.
Yeah.
So the results the therapist can get are oftentimes almost always 100% time better than the results
Of
you're going to
course.
get. And then when you try to emulate the same protocol, it can be disastrous.
It can be really hard. And so they say it to us, and immediately there's a part of it that we're angry.
Yeah, because
And
we
there's-
go on the defensive. Like
Yeah.
you try doing it
Right.
24/7, 365.
And I always felt like a failure, right? You're going to ask me, you're setting me up for failure to do the thing I don't want to do. But a lot of times, and I talk to therapists who say, the parents will come back and say to them, well, do you have a child on the spectrum?
Right.
You know, and we get that kind, and then I think that makes them shut down. And then I was saying to you, then we're off to the races. So, talk to us a little bit about, as parents, what can we be saying to therapists when we're feeling that overwhelmed, that's productive, not, so do you have kids on the spectrum?
Right. And you're right, because that's when the animosity would start, and then the relationship breaks down from that point. I think a lot of times the genesis of miscommunication comes from parents when they, emotional reactions when they see their child struggling, or they see their child having a hard time, or, as Nancy was saying, they see the child do things that you or them as a parent aren't able to get their children to do. So sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative, and that creates these emotional reactions with many families where they aren't able to communicate their feelings appropriately to the therapist, and the therapist might ask something benign about following through with this, or please let him tantrum, let him work through this, we're going to go ahead and work through this, or again, maybe following through with language protocols and using, AT devices, when it's a lot easier to just get the child something that they know that the child wants, rather than going through the steps on using an AT device. So there's lots of different reasons, but I think you're both right in that it comes from emotional reactions for different reasons, different things that come up, and how they're feeling at that time. Now, what do they do with it? How are they holding that, right? They're holding it right there. How do they communicate with the therapist? And I think honesty is the best thing. Just saying, I'm really having a hard time right now because he doesn't do this for me. Or I'm having a really hard time right now because it bothers me to see her tantrum, or it bothers me to see her so upset. And then this way it starts a dialogue where the therapist can then explain why they're letting the child work through the tantrum, or why it's necessary to use the AT device. Now we're guiding the conversation to where it needs to go clinically, but yet it started with the admission of, I'm having an emotionally hard time with this because ... Now everyone knows each other's points of view, and we're able to communicate better and more appropriately.
Yeah, I'm fond of telling the story. When Jem was hitting me, there was a period of time in which there were 3 different years that we cycled through, and in the spring, for whatever reason, something would happen to me or to him, but in the spring, I would get hit. And I'm not just hit in the head. And I don't know how everybody else feels, but man, I got hit as a child. I don't deal well when somebody hits me in the head, even if it's my 3-year-old. Like, it wasn't good for my psyche. And I was really skating on a thin edge. And I remember coming to Card and saying, I was keeping it a secret for a while because I was embarrassed.
Right.
And I felt like I was a failure and I was ashamed. And I came to Card and I said, at our clinic, somebody's got to help us, because something bad's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be, but he's going to punch my lights out. I'm going to, whatever. Something bad's going to happen. Help me. And they brought in the A-team, and one of the people on the A-team was the fabulous Art Wilkie, who I always say is like the Santa Claus of Card, who would never make anybody mad ever. The sweetest, nicest guy, right? Vince is smiling. And Art, and it was Dr. Jonathan Tarbucks at the same time. They were showing me what to do. And Art was going through this whole thing, this whole series of events to show me what to do, because it would be when I would put him, we'd be in the grocery store, and he'd be in the little thing in the grocery store, and he would start whacking at my head,
Right.
and I would say, that's it, we're out of the grocery store, right?
Right.
Because that was what the therapist had said to do. And so we would leave the grocery store, and then I'd go to put him in the car, and now he's heavy, and I gotta bend over, my hands are full of
Right.
him, and he
Right.
would, and then I would have to get him into the seat and get the 5-point harness on, and I
You're
needed
being
a
hit the whole
helmet.
time, right.
And so I was, they were showing me what to do, and you're Vince, but Art was showing me what to do, and the whole time it was like there was a thin layer of smoke coming out of my head, because I
Right.
got madder and madder as Art was showing me what to do. And he turned around in the clinic and he was like, so do you think you could do that? And I was so angry at the lovely Art Wilkie. And he could tell, and he said, tell me, I see something in your face, tell me what, and I just started yelling at him, right? And I said, where is my purse in this scenario, Art? You don't have a purse. You're trying to show me how to do this, and you don't even have a purse, so where is my purse? Because he was doing this, and I was
Right.
like, well, it must be nice to be unencumbered
do
with a
it, right.
purse. And I was so mad, and he looked at me, and he was so patient, he said, is that the problem? And I said, yes, because I would have my purse hitting me in the head and my purse hitting me in the back,
Right.
or my purse in the cart and somebody stealing it
Right.
while I'm trying to deal with him. And Art looked at me for a second. He said, would you be willing to wear a fanny pack while we do this intervention?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so stupid. And I was like, sure. You know what I mean? But that hadn't occurred to me.
Right.
And then I was kind of mad that it hadn't occurred to me, and I felt ridiculous, and all I wanted to do was leave and cry. I just
Right.
felt like I'm an idiot. But of course, I then went and did the fanny pack, and he stopped hitting me in the head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful that I did say something, but I felt stupid, Vince.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think sometimes that happens, right? Where parents get, shameful that they can't, tolerate their child crying, or that they don't see the bigger picture, right? They don't see that a fanny pack or a backpack would work over a purse. But that's because you're emotionally invested in it. You're emotionally dealing with it, and you're doing it with one hand tied behind your back, where a lot of times the suggestions, while they might be a little bit logical, it's because we're not looking at that. We're looking at that micro frame of what's happening right then, right now. How do I protect myself? How do we get in fight or flight? And that's where the collaboration is so beneficial with the families and the ABA supervisors, or, assaultive behavior technicians that are able to work together, because you can look at the bigger picture, come up with alternatives, maybe that you kind of hit yourself and go, duh, I should have known that. But it's that collaboration where we come up with those beautiful interventions and beautiful ideas. It's not one or the other, it's together.
And it's always so interesting when you do access, like sometimes I don't even know what's wrong, but when you
Right.
do access it and say it to these young people, it's like they're stunned, because whatever the thing is that's stopping us truly hadn't occurred to them. It's always something like really random that
Yeah.
had,
Right.
and that to you and I, Nancy, is like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Of
Like,
course
of
there's
course,
a purse.
right.
Right? But why would that occur to Art, who's never carried a purse in his life?
Right.
Did you ever have that back in the days when you were a therapist, Vince, where a parent said something to you that you went, okay, now I understand why you're having a problem with that?
Right, absolutely. And it goes back to kind of the comment you had mentioned, where families say, well, do you have a child that's autistic? One of the things I used to get when I was a young therapist was, do you have children?
Yeah.
Period. And, while it came out in, oftentimes in an emotional reaction, it does, to give you that kind of, point of view of, you don't know this. You're not getting up at 4 a.m, and you're not having to be fully responsible for this person. And so a lot of times when the parents would bring that perspective to a situation, any behavioral situation, could be aggressive behavior, or even just non-compliant behavior, or maybe self-stimulatory behavior, they bring up the point of view, what it is like for a parent who has to be responsible for so much more than the therapist or a supervisor. And that was really beneficial for me as a therapist, because a lot of our young individuals, our young therapists, they don't have that perspective. They're looking in through the lens of ABA and what scientifically needs to be done. But when you're able to look at the full perspective of what a parent has to do, the emotions they have to deal with, the other responsibilities that they have to deal with, then it actually becomes a better collaboration, because now we as the professionals are able to understand the parental point of view, and then we hope that that opens up the door for the parents then to understand the professional point of view, and we have a good symbiosis and working relationship at that point. But the parents' point of view is extremely important. Absolutely.
And we often feel like saying to the therapist, yeah, well, you don't have to deal with it
24/7.
24/7. You walk out the door, you come in here and have a good session, and then you walk out the door. And it falls apart then.
One of the things that I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when you were here, Vince, that the show Parenthood I thought was really interesting, the way it depicted autism, because when the boy in Parenthood started therapy, the first therapist showed up, and I can't think what the name of the actress was, beautiful actress, shows up at the door to do therapy, and she's young and beautiful, and the mom was kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, this beautiful young woman's going to come in, and she starts to say something to the boy, and the mom's like, oh, he's not going to be able to understand that or do that. And the therapist kind of puts up her hand. It's like, well, we're going to work on that. And within 3 minutes, she gets him to do it.
Right.
And the mom is furious.
Right.
And I the thing that's sad to me is that I totally understand that and felt the same way. Because you're supposed to be the mom, and you're supposed to be the one to get the
results.
And if a young, pretty girl can come in and do it in 5 seconds, then it wasn't that he couldn't do it. It was that I couldn't get him to do it.
Exactly.
Right? And so there's that's going on. But it's so sad, because these are the people who've come to help us. And sometimes we're so in our own way feeling jealous that they can get our children to do something that we won't get out of our way to learn how they do it. But it's human nature. I think we're all, guilty of that. But so Vince, how can we help ourselves when we're feeling that way to remember this is a member of our team and they're doing good things with our kids, and that while there's a place for us to be jealous, it's not helping our kid.
Right. And I think that's the exact mind frame you wanted to take, is that we're all one family, right? We're all doing this together. And I know the supervision teams that I have when I'm leading a team or working with a family, I state that several times, is that we can't do this without you, just as you've turned to us for our expertise to be able to help you. There's no one person that we can take out of this equation that's going to make it better. Because I think sometimes family members feel that, well, if I'm not involved, this is going to be better. Or if I take myself out because I'm the problem, things are going to get better. And that's absolutely the opposite. That's not the case at all. Everybody, participating, everybody's point of views are valuable. And taking it from the we are a team point of view, I think, is extremely helpful. And it has to start from the beginning. It has to start from the very beginning, from the beginning, the time they initiate ABA services to the time that they end, is that everybody's just as valuable as the other person to that team. Because like Nancy was saying, and then Jen and you were saying as well, a lot of times when you see your child do something for someone else, you immediately take it upon yourself as a failure, that I didn't do this or I couldn't do this. When we want to look at a bigger picture where, we have to break down the child's behavior and see why he's doing it at home and not doing it with a new person. Because sometimes it's not anybody's fault. It was just a conditioned behavior that happened unbeknownst to us, that's why it was conditioned, because it was functional for him, right? You maybe not using the AT device and just pointing at something, and grandma and dad and whoever immediately just gave him the stuff. Great. That was communicative. It was functional. Then when we try to bring up, maybe verbal commands, the child doesn't do it because this works in the house. But then a new person comes in and they don't follow the point ever, and they only ask for a verbal command. The child then uses it, gets what they want. Now they see that this behavior I have to do with this person because that's what works. This behavior I do with that person, and that's what works. And that's why the consistency of using interventions is so important, that the team and the family are using the same methods, same behavioral interventions, same techniques or AT devices or special technologies so that it doesn't matter who's doing it, me, mom, dad, the therapist, that the same result is what we're asking for.
You just said something a few minutes ago, though, Vince, that just opened my eyes to something I hadn't thought about before, because you said, sometimes a parent will see that the child doesn't do it when they're there, and so they think, oh, I'm the problem, and then they feel like removing themselves from the problem. See, I never felt that, but I'll bet that's what a lot of what we see in our dads stems from. Because I have watched dads go, well, he only does that when I'm around, so maybe I'll go work more to provide, and that's how I'll help, because I don't seem to be helping doing this. I'll remove myself from the equation. And the problem that happens is the further you remove yourself from the equation, the more the kid progresses with other people, and the more it looks like it's just you.
Right.
Which is a false positive, right? So when we see dads doing that, Vince, pulling more and more away, what do you recommend that we do to pull them back in?
Yeah, and again, you're right. And then stereotypically, it is typically more of the fathers that you see do this. However, we do see other, family members that do it as well.
Sure.
I think for me, the key is to catch it early, is to not wait until there's been a lot of progress or a lot of change that's happened, and then that parent or caregiver is not involved in it, because that gap continues to get bigger at that point. And then we start dealing with other things that come up then, where the child now is not emotionally being supported by a parent, or that parent now is feeling disconnected from their own family, so that creates marital strain, those types of things. So I think it's extremely important to catch that early. So making sure that we talk to a parent that doesn't come to clinics, making sure we reach out for their points of view, making sure that they, are at least in agreement with what's going on. Now we can't 100% patrol or control what happens at home, but at least that they understand, us as the professionals, at least we know if they understand the interventions, the reason the interventions are there, the reason it's important for everyone to do it, then we hope we've given them, everything that they need to go ahead and follow through. But I know for myself, I've reached out to parents just to meet with them privately, to ask them what their concerns are, what are their goals, what are their expectations of treatment, even if they don't participate in our clinic meetings. So then it shows that, we value their input, and we also think that they're extremely important to this process as well, kind of countering that intuition to pull away.
We just would like to stick you in our back pocket and take you to every single parent all the time, Vince.
I know parent meetings are us, right?
But Vince, I feel like, and I've said this to other guests before, but not to everybody, right? I feel like there's a book here that you need to write. Do you know what I mean? I think that it's so hard for parents, this journey, and we were talking before about the advice that I got, that I went to a marriage and family therapist who suggested to me that we stop ABA because that seemed to be the thing that was causing all the stress. And that one of the things that I really love about you is that that's never going to come out of your mouth, that you so totally get it. But I really feel like, Vince, there's a book here that you need to write, that so many people would benefit from. Even if it was just a book about how to talk to your therapist and know that how to get on the same team with your therapy team.
Very important.
And I can see moms buying it to give to their husbands, but then sitting down and reading it themselves and going, oh, I need this too. Because I think we all do need that.
Yes, we do. We need to be reminded.
And also, I gotta say that, we're forever, this, Vince, we're forever talking to the therapist about doing perspective taking and taking things from the parent's point of view. It might be an interesting read for them to go, oh, maybe that's why they're surly with me sometimes. It's not that they think I'm doing a bad job. It's that they're jealous of the fact that I can get their kid to do, because every time I've ever said that to a therapist is like, oh, well, then I'd be happy to show you how to do that. And then the relationship is so much better. So Vince, could you please write a book?
got to co-author one together from both perspectives.
I'm happy to be in
The
on
parent
that.
and the therapist
And also,
perspective.
can I say
The
too?
three of us put one together.
All right, in our spare time, of which we have none.
Right.
We'll get right on that. But Vince, I gotta say this. I don't know. Have you got a new pair of glasses or what's going on? You look like a young James Caan.
No, they're the same ones.
They are?
Doesn't he look like a young
Yeah, he
James
does.
Caan?
He does.
You totally look like
Maybe
Jimmy
because
Caan.
I finally can wear long sleeves again in California.
Yeah,
Is that what
I know,
it is?
it's fall.
I don't think so. You look like Jimmy Caan today. I don't know what. I was like, look at him. He looks like James Caan. I never noticed that before. Vince, we just adore you, and I'm so grateful for your life experience and the way you share that with parents. It's just an amazing, amazing gift to our community.
Yes, and thank you for all your support and your information today.
How can people, if they're a card client and they want to have some of your time to talk about things that are going on with them, how can a card client reach you?
They can always reach me. They can email me at v.redmond, R-E-D-M-O-N-D, as you can see my name's on there, just v.redmond at centerforautism.com.
And if somebody, because you do take private patients outside of card as well, if somebody, because you can do telehealth here in California, correct?
Yeah, if you're looking for counseling, we also do counseling services as kind of a cutout service, and you can email me that as well.
Okay, same address. And I recommend that. If somebody's out there and they're like, well, I would go to a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I don't know where, you have that option with Vince. You could talk to him and see if you can work that out schedule-wise. I know he's busy, but, you could see what can happen. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Vince.
No problem, ladies. Have a great rest of your month. And I'll see you next month.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We're
And
almost out of time.
I know, we're almost out of time. Can I take a quick second to talk about our new website?
Oh, about the new website.
Well, and tomorrow's a pretty cool show, too. We're going to have
But
Elaine
tell me
Hall
about-
on from the Miracle Project. We got Chloe Snee on tomorrow, autism expert. She's going to be answering your questions. And then we've got an amazing woman, Wendy Dawson, is going to be on from Social Motion. They're a group in Houston that is doing amazing things with her students, which will tie into the other thing that I want to talk about. She has artisans. These are young adults, and they're artisans. They learn their craft working with Social Motion, and they get to sell their artwork.
Oh, great.
And
Where's she out of?
Houston.
Oh, Houston.
Houston. And so, but, with the potential of maybe franchising and going other places. So we, this week, we launched our new website, but it's in beta right now, and people can go and check it out. And one of the reasons why I especially want you to check it out, so you have to go to http, no S, // and then it's beta, B-E-T-A, autism-live.com. And when you go there, on the top of every page is a little icon that says Toy Guide. And if you click on the Toy Guide, it shows you the 2018 Autism Live Toy and Gift Guide, where we've picked items for every age range and for every ability that we think are particularly rock stars this year. And we have some really fun stuff on there. And we included parents this year. And when you go, you're going to see that there are earrings. We chose earrings that are made by the artisans from Social Motion.
Oh, okay.
So you have the opportunity to get a pair of earrings for somebody, for a parent in your life, that have been handcrafted by an individual who's an adult on the autism spectrum, plus tons of other toys. If you, whether it's, no matter which holiday or birthday, your son's got a birthday coming up, and it should give you at least an idea for everybody from babies up through adults, and then a special section that's just about parents. I'm really proud of the guide this year, and I want to hear from you guys. And the other thing that we added this year, last year you guys said you loved the guide, but then you had to go look for the toy, you had to look it up and see where to buy it, and you said, boy, it would be nice if there were just a button that we could go right to the place where we can buy the toy, and we did that.
Good for you.
It is interactive, so you click on the thing and you go right there, and then you can order the toy right from there.
Good for you.
It takes you to their site. It's no longer our site. We're not making any money on it, but we wanted you to be able to have toys that would be toys and gifts that would be meaningful to people We did a lot of research, had a lot of kids in trying and playing with toys, and we've got all of them stuffed in my office right now, and people have come and played and said, hey, these are fabulous,
Yeah.
you know?
Good.
So I think we got a really good mix this year. So definitely
Okay.
check that out.
And what else do you have tomorrow? This year?
So tomorrow, Chloe Snee is going to answer your questions. Elaine Hall from the Miracle Project is going to be talking with us about the kiddos that are on atypical. She's got, I think, there's a whole host of students from the Miracle Project that are regulars are on atypical. You know, it just got picked up for its 3rd season.
It did, okay.
So that's a fabulous thing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then, as I mentioned, Wendy Dawson's going to tell us about social motion. It started as a social skills thing,
Right.
but then those kids progressed, and now they have this, I mean, basically it's a workspace, and they make all kinds of keychains and other stuff. I particularly like the earrings,
Okay.
but they work with metal and they work with leather, and they're referred to as artisans, which I
Great.
quite like. So
Fantastic.
all of that is happening tomorrow, and then
Okay.
of course we're going to be back here next week.
Right.
Next week is the last Wednesday show for us before Thanksgiving, because the following week we decided not to do a show
Right.
on the Wednesday. It's just too crazy,
Right.
the traffic in LA, you know, and when you got to cook things. But you've got, Wyatt's got a birthday between
Wyatt
now and
has a
then,
birthday on Saturday, party.
which is very
His
exciting.
actual birthday is
Friday.
Friday,
Yeah, but he's going to be 17.
17.
How did we
Good
get
for-
here, Nancy?
I don't know. How did we?
Our boys were little when we started this.
I know.
It's full on crazy. But anyway, we'll let you know some of, like, if Wyatt's okay with that, we'll let you know about the get together celebrating Wyatt. Well, that's all for today, but we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye bye.